Hi there, and welcome everyone to our Compliance Forum 2025, a look back and what lies ahead. My name is Jared Moyer, and I'm going to be the presenter for this program here today. Today's agenda is fairly simple and straightforward. We are going to take a look back at 2025 and make sure you didn't miss something. And then we're going to peek up onto the horizon and say, all right, what's up around the corner as we flip the calendar over from 25 to 26. Now, a couple of other things about the program here today. It's being recorded. And so there may be some things, because we're going to hit a lot of different things at a high level today. The idea is make a checklist of things that you need to go back and research. Gosh, you know what? I missed that. We need to put that on our to-do list to go figure out if there's something that we need to do there. Or it's, you know what, peace of mind that, yep, we're on top of it. We got that. All right, what else are we looking at? And then again, trying to give you some food for thought as we flip that calendar over. We do have a short outline. You can access that through the Zoom control panel, the resources tab. Also, we want to make sure your experience goes as it should today. We've got lots of different teammates that are standing behind the scenes, making sure things go as they should today. So if you've got issues with your experience and something that we can fix, we'll do our best. Use the chat button to reach out to our teammates there, and they'll try to get you set up with respect to things that we might be able to fix in that area. If you haven't already done so, open up that outline. There's some information at the front of that outline, products, services, who we are, where we come from. I'm going to let you read through that on your own. I want you to get to the first page numbered 1, bottom right-hand corner. And again, if you don't have that outline, you can access it via that resources tab in the Zoom control panel. So again, the idea is let's make sure you didn't miss something in 2025, and then we'll peek ahead to what's going to happen or maybe on the horizon as we flip over that calendar to 2026. All right, page number 1, Roman numeral 1 at the top, that compliance in 2025 look back. We look back at 2025, beginning of the year. We actually started pretty slow. They didn't really get going with things coming out as far as to-dos and things to recognize until we were almost done with the first quarter of the year. But there were a few things that we need to mention. Now, number 1 is something that was withdrawn, but just want to remind you all that there was this instantaneously declined transactions, NSF, non-sufficient funds prohibition that was going to be set in motion. Here's the thing. Certain things during the last part of a previous administration's leadership can actually be unwound. And this is one of them that got unwound, basically a withdrawal of the proposal. And that's all it took was just, hey, we're withdrawing this to get it out of the way. And so that's not something we should see or hear anything about, at least for the next 3 years. Let's go to number 2. The Consumer Compliance Outlook. So this is the 4th quarter issue from 2024, but actually issued in the 1st quarter of 2025. It is one of the best compliance publications out there. The Federal Reserve puts it out. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. Some things that I took note of in this one, and you'll see them in your outline there. They put together their top Equal Credit Opportunity Act, fair lending related violations. We can always learn from what the other regulatory agencies are putting out there. So even if you're not regulated by the Fed, I would recommend that you get this publication to make sure you keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on beyond your prudential regulator. They also identified their top TRID violations. That's always something that's top of mind and compliance discussions throughout the country. FinTech partnerships. Okay, if you're thinking about entering into one of those or you're part of a FinTech relationship, hey, there's a lot of good that can come from those relationships, but there's some compliance related matters there that you should be considering that are outlined in that article that's in that publication. And then there's an interagency statement article on elder abuse, elder financial abuse, and that's not getting any better. So just make sure you're doing what you can to stay out in front of that. Again, those publications, what can we learn from what others are observing, other regulatory agencies, others in the industry? And you'll see those things come up a couple different times as we go through this. FinCEN, you're going to hear a lot about FinCEN and AML matters. Okay, none of it's really big, huge, big splashes as far as what's come out, but they have a lot of information that's been pushed out this year and different alerts, newsletters, publications. There are different things that they call them. In fact, my teammate Kevin, he's put together a chart. You maybe were here early listening to us lead up to the top of the hour. We've got an AML CFT membership group that meets on a month-to-month basis, and you could certainly become a member of that. If you want to know more about, please reach out to us. But he's taken these different publications and kind of put a chart together to explain the difference between this publication and that publication as far as the news that's come out and kind of what you have to do with each one of those. That's one of the many things that we're breaking down month to month with all of the things that are BSA AML related and the changes coming down the pike. So this particular one has to do with relationship investment scams. Basically reminds us of, or gives us things to watch out for in relationship to these scams, and things that can be shared with your customers, with your front line, so that we can increase the awareness level there to try to mitigate some of the risk with some of the frauds associated with these types of scams. Let's go to page number 2, number 4 at the top. So you're going to hear about the FDIC signage a couple different times today, and this was the first delay earlier this year. So in March, they delayed from May of 2025 until March of 2026. That March 2026 day is going to come and go, though, because there's a proposed delay that I'll get to a little bit later that's going to kick the can even further down the road, January of 2027. So this has to do with the FDIC official digital signage. The other signage, that signage requirements that have already changed and been set into motion, and those dates have come and gone, you need to comply with that. This would be the official digital sign where they're kicking the can down the road. And there's a proposal out there right now. We'll look to see a final rule soon. And then ultimately what it appears is a January 1st, 2027 mandatory compliance date with some new flexibility there. Again, we'll come back to that a little bit more later on. Number 5, let's take a look at this one. So NCUA, so National Credit Union Association, they used to publish overdraft and NSF fee income information on an ongoing basis. And they've said they're going to stop doing that because their perception, their take on overdrafts has changed. Okay, in some situations, for some people, that's the cheapest or the best alternative, if you will, as opposed to credit cards and other forms of credit, payday loans, things like that may be more costly. And so it's no longer all negative on the overdraft front, and the NCUA has put out a new take on that. And one of their things is they're not going to publish that overdraft and NSF income information on an ongoing basis. We got another FinCEN publication. So this is an interim final rule. This was the beneficial ownership requirement for your customers. So you have your own beneficial ownership rules that you have to follow and comply with. This was for your customer. They had to do a registration, and it applied originally to both domestic and foreign customers. Well, this publication, this interim rule here, not only pushed the deadline out for this rule, but also changed the coverage. Your domestic customers no longer have to comply with this. It's just the foreign companies that will have to be reporting under the beneficial ownership requirements. You still have, but I want to reiterate, you still have to comply with your customer due diligence for beneficial owners. That didn't change at all. This was your customers' reporting requirements. Again, just foreign, domestic are now out. Top of page number 3, number 7. So the CFPB had published, by way of a court case that they were involved with under the previous administration, that wire transfers, as a result of this court case, okay, are going to be electronic funds transfers. Well, the new administration stepped in immediately and said, nope, we're taking that down. EFTs are not, wire transfers are not EFTs, electronic funds transfers. So that would be stepping over what the regulation and the law define as an electronic funds transfer. So this was a much needed interpretation here that was reversed, okay, that wire transfers are not considered an EFT for things like unauthorized transfers and disputes in Regulation E. Number 8, 2024 HMDA data was released in late March. What you need to know about this is just to be prepared. Know what your data says about you. Make sure you've done that homework. The idea is no surprises. You don't want to be surprised by something that the outside world, okay, interprets or views about what your data says or doesn't say about your mortgage lending practices as it relates to fair lending. So make sure you've done your homework, you've sliced and diced your own data, and that there are no surprises. It also is a good idea to take a look at your peers, people that are serving the same areas or that are in the same areas that you're doing business. We've got another FinCEN alert, bulk cash smuggling. This basically just says, hey, be vigilant. Okay, here's some things to look out for. It's trying to increase awareness as it relates to Mexico-based criminal organizations and the cash smuggling that goes on there. Make sure you've shared that information and done your part in increasing awareness there. Kind of a similar thing here with the ISIS. This has to do with the financing that's associated with ISIS, and they provided some red flag examples. Again, an awareness thing, trying to make sure that you're not missing out on something and missing out on your reporting requirements when it comes to things that might be running through your organization as it relates to ISIS and financing. Page number 4, number 11 at the top of the page. So the court vacated, and there's a couple different ones of these as we go through our look back in 2025. This has to do with the credit card late fee final rule. So again, there are things that in the last part of a previous leadership, previous administration that can be undone. Sometimes it takes going to court, and that's what happened here. This went to court. The CFPB decided once the leadership changed not to defend it anymore. And so the court vacated the credit card late fee rule. So that is no more. Number 12, the CFPB early on this year, April, they outlined their 2025 priorities. And these have started to become more concrete as far as exactly where they're going as the year has gone here. But early in the year, it was talking about pressing threats to consumers, service members, their families, veterans, and then shifting. Here's probably the big thing, how they're doing oversight. They're shifting from enforcement and that type of supervision at their level. Okay, you're really not going to hear much from them as far as enforcement, and you're not. What we're seeing them is kind of undo things and ultimately maybe even close down. We'll see what happens in the next couple of months here, right? But shifting away from enforcement under the CFPB to giving it back to the states, okay? And we'll see where that ends up. That could be a bit chaotic. We haven't seen how that really is going to shake out, but that was something that they had put out there or floated out there earlier on this year. So we'll see. It still remains to be seen where that's going to end up, how that's going to go. But look for potentially your state to do more down the road. Number 13. So it's an executive order. Let me go off on kind of a tangent here with executive orders. You have probably seen and heard of a lot of executive orders in 2025, and I don't think we're done with them. You're going to continue to hear more. Why are you seeing and hearing about so many executive orders? Well, they're commonplace, especially when a new president takes over. They come from the president's office, from their desk. One of the reasons we believe we're seeing so much more as far as executive orders with this president and the leadership right now is it has to do with what they can't get done in Washington. I know as of right now that the government's closed, but pretend for a moment it was open and they were trying to work through passing laws and things like that and doing things through Congress. Not a lot of bipartisan support. So even though the Republicans have the majority in both the House and the Senate, okay, in the House, a simple majority vote wins and things pass, right? Okay, so the House isn't a problem, it's the Senate. Okay, they have a majority in the Senate, okay, but they don't have a super majority. They don't have 60 votes. Now, why is that important? It takes 60 votes to get something through the Senate without having to deal with the filibuster rules, which is basically a path to nowhere and a waste of time. So, how can they manipulate? How can they, maybe manipulate's not the right word. How can they push their agenda if they can't get laws changed because they don't have the supermajority votes in the Senate? Well, one way to push their agenda is to create these executive orders. They don't have or carry the same weight of law, but it does affect policy and framework from a regulatory agency perspective. So this is a way for them to kind of push their agenda and create that framework, create those policies without having to go through the lawmaking channel changes, going through an act of Congress, if you will. So you're seeing more of this stuff. So it's going to affect your regulatory agency, but it doesn't change the law, which brings me to number 13. This headline here is restoring equality of opportunity and meritocracy. What it really is trying to do is get into some fair lending things, okay, which are long-standing laws and regulations, specifically focusing on things like disparate impact. Okay, disparate impact, the law didn't change associated with that, but what has changed is that the regulatory agencies have removed it from their regulatory framework. When, in other words, their policy, when they come in and do an examination, they're not going to spend a lot of time on disparate impact. Okay, probably none, because they've been told to look the other way. Now, that doesn't change the law. Okay, the law still remains that disparate impact is still there. There are years and years of case law out there, okay, where disparate impact can still be brought against you. In fact, civil liability risk doesn't go anywhere. So the regulators may not bring and force this upon you, but it still can be a problem for you from a civil liability standpoint. It didn't change any laws. It simply changed the policy and the framework from the Washington perspective when you go through your next examination. And keep in mind, that's only for the next 3 years. Statute of limitations on fair lending, 5 years. Things that happen today can come back and be a problem for you down the road. And not even just 5 years down the road, could be next week, next month from a civil liability standpoint. So this executive order here, you're going to hear about it. And it's about basically making sure that we're basing things on ability and talent, not social class or wealth. Okay. And I think that that's absolutely true. We shouldn't look at it that way, but it doesn't do away with long-standing ways of looking at fair lending either. Stay tuned. You're going to hear more about this. Remember, it is just an executive order. Page 14, the CFPB has dropped their UDAP guidance appeal. This all has to do with the changeover in leadership. Once we had new leadership with the CFPB, they went, yep, we're done here. We don't care about this anymore. We're moving on. And so the whole idea that the CFPB was trying to defend that illegal discrimination could be identified with UDAP is gone, because this administration, this leadership is not going to defend that. And that was a previous leadership thing. So that's gone by the wayside. Page number 5, number 15 at the top of the page. Annually, the CFPB is required to produce their complaint report. It's actually called a consumer response report, but it's good information to take in. What are your customers or customers like yours from across the nation saying about the financial industry? Okay, maybe you haven't heard the same complaints, or maybe you're oblivious to them. Okay, could be. There's lots of things in here that are just good food for thought and could be leading indicators to things that may be going on with your customers, with the areas that you serve. And so it's definitely worth reading the summary at a minimum to understand the challenges that customers are currently facing in the financial industry. We've got another FinCEN alert. This has to do with oil smuggling schemes. It, like some of the other ones, it highlights some of the red flag indicators. Make sure you've passed those along and that you are trying to identify those within your organization as they come about, if they come about. Number 17, here's the first quarter edition of 2025 of the Consumer Compliance Outlook. Again, Federal Reserve publication. They produced their top 10, I think it was top 10 compliance violations, their top HMDA violations. That had really good information there. We took that and I think we spent almost 45 minutes to an hour in one of our groups talking about the different HMDA violations there and what that meant and what we should be looking for. So definitely some good information there. Top CRA violations. CRA is not our expertise area, but just want to pass that along. There's a record retention guide. A lot of times with our quick response system or quick response product, which is where clients just like you can call us and we turn around and give a response in 4 hours or less. We take a lot of calls asking about record retention, and they get a nice little guide here, an updated guide in the Outlook publication. Bonus one that's not listed there in your materials is they also give their top complaints as noted by the Federal Reserve. So even though it's not your regulator potentially, it's good information to see what's going on within the other regulators and the banks and different financial companies that they provide oversight to. All right, let's go to page number 6, number 18 at the top of the page, overdraft rule. And so there was an overdraft rule that was kind of billed as for very large financial institutions. And that thing was actually made final, okay, during the last end of the previous administration, last end of 2024. But, okay, one of the other vehicles to undo, okay, what was done in the previous administration end is a thing called a joint resolution. It's done through Congress. And if they can get a joint resolution passed, okay, that affects something that was done during that time frame, it actually kills it off. And then it can't come back in the same way, shape, or form down the road. Now, you don't want to say never. There are additional congressional proceedings that can revive things, but it would take a lot of doing and getting along to make that happen. My point here is we shouldn't see this rear its head in its same way, shape, or form anytime in the near future. And so that overdraft cap at $5, truth in lending disclosures for overdraft programs, that's gone by the wayside. Shouldn't have to worry about that. Number 19, the CFPB withdraws guidance. This has created a lot of discussion. What I wrote down in my book here is big splash, but wait for it, minimal effect. So here's the deal. I want to say the number was 67 different documents. They came in the form of statements, advisory opinions, interpretations. There's just a few things. You know, the CFPB had a lot of different things that they called information that they put out, right? And so this just unwound some of that. Now, this didn't unwind anything that was legal, okay, like a law or a regulation. Okay, this was guidance documents. Now, if you read through the reasoning behind this, okay, it was because there was a lot of redundancy. It just wasn't necessary because the law or the regulation already stipulated that it was a requirement or that it was a fact. And so we didn't need this extra document to say the same thing that was already said in the law or the regulation. So that's why I say it sounds like a big splash. They're taking and killing off all these documents, but how big effect did it really have? And it didn't have that big of effect. So big splash, minimal effect. They will probably do more of this, and maybe there'll be a bigger effect down the road. But it's just guidance. It didn't take great acts to issue the guidance in the first place. So taking it away shouldn't be a big deal anyway. Number 20, the CFPB withdraws their EFT proposal. This had to do with non-bank financial institutions, so non-banks that were participating in that market. Consumer protection, digital assets, that was part of it. I believe that for the most part, this one's been shelved. I think this will come back at some point. How they're going to regulate that part of the industry will likely be up for discussion and debate at a later point. But for the time being, this version of it is gone. It was from the previous administration. Number 21, the CFPB withdraws Regulation AA proposal. This has to do with terms and conditions that are baked into legal agreements. And so there was going to be some prohibitions there. Basically, they said this is redundant, not necessary, and therefore we are going to, again, put this by the wayside and move forward without it. Page number 7, number 22 at the top of the page, the data broker proposal. So this one kind of surprised me. This has to do with my data and your data and how people that have it out there in the world are using it and whether or not they can sell it and things like that. My opinion is we need a rule there to do that. It's the Wild West right now, but it's not going to be this rule. And so they've shelved this one and said not necessary right now. Again, I think this one will likely come back and be part of a discussion, either as part of something else or in a different form down the road, because certainly our data should not be Wild West, if you will. There should be some rules associated with how and when it's utilized. Number 23, OFAC basics. They put out one of these about once a year. Basically, it's training-like information about how to use or contact the OFAC compliance hotline and how to go about doing that. And so just information probably more so for your training programs. If you're utilizing or you need additional training from an OFAC standpoint for the person that's in charge with reaching out to them, this would be a good piece of information to pass along. Number 24, the OCC's regulatory agenda. They put out kind of their release. This was mid-year. Takeaways here, they're in that paragraph. Embrace technology, promoting innovation, making sure that there's access, reducing regulatory burden. In fact, you're going to see towards the end of our look back time frame here, just recently, they've done a lot to try to reduce regulatory burden. And so they're making good on what they've stated earlier this year, but this was that statement from June. Number 25, FinCEN advisory. This has to do with Iran and the activities associated with them, reporting sanctions, evasions, things like that, things to be on the lookout for. Just make sure that you're aware of that advisory. We'll stay in the BSA AML camp, page number 8, number 26, the guiding principles for BSA AML modernization. This was the Treasury putting out a statement on kind of where they'd like to see things going. Just recently, some of this is starting to come to fruition. I just read the other day that in Congress, there is a bill that has just been put out. Now, just started, but they want to modernize CTRs and SARs and by increasing thresholds. That's what a lot of this is trying to go back to what the OCC said in the item on the previous page, reducing regulatory burden. So increasing those SAR thresholds, those CTR thresholds. I want to say 30,000 was floated out for the CTR threshold. And I don't remember what the SAR one was, but they're increasing them and then tying them to inflation is the idea. Now, whether this actually happens or not remains to be seen. But the idea is that we need to update this AML CFT BSA modernization needs an update. Number 27, FinCEN alert, again, obtaining alternative TIN information. So this is kind of a win for bankers that you are permitted to use tax identification number information provided by a third party. It doesn't have to come directly from the customer. Now, it needs to be the customer's TIN, no question, but you rely on information provided by a third party as an alternative to how you've been collecting tax identification number information. It still needs to comply with all the other elements of the CIP rules, but it is an alternative option. Number 28, bottom of page number 8, the OCC key risks in banking. They identified BSA AML as something that remains a key risk when it comes to banking. They also acknowledged the elevated fraud risks, and fraud's going to come up a couple different times here as we go through the remaining parts of our look back. Across the board, fraud is up. Part of that has to do with technology and innovation. You know, as we acquire new technology and we innovate along the way, guess what? So are the bad actors out there. They're learning new ways to lie, cheat, and steal all the time. We're never going to be out ahead of them, but the hope is to be no more than a step or two behind them as they're using that new technology and innovating to lie, cheat, and steal from the financial industry. Let's go to page 9, number 29 at the top of the page. So Regulation CC has a required increase every 5 years for the delay availability amounts. Now, this is a plus. It's not adverse to the customer. So when this happens, you have to notify the customer of the increased availability amounts to the customer, but you can do it up to 30 days after the change. The increase went from 225 to 275, and then for the larger amount, it went up to 6725. So not nice round numbers, but new numbers nonetheless. And you had to notify your customers. And again, you had to do so within 30 days after that change. That change was effective July 1st of this year. Number 30. So we've heard from the Federal Reserve. We've heard from the CFPB as we've gone here. So what about the FDIC? Okay, what are their highlights? Well, they put out a publication every so often that says, here's what's going on with FDIC regulated institutions. Again, I don't care who you're regulated by. Okay, you should learn from what's going on in other areas. So if you're a Fed bank, you should be reading up on what's going on with FDIC banks, because those things do eventually cross over. They talk to one another. And so they just talk generally about performance in this one of their institutions that they supervise, top violations. Hey, those are always good lists to take a look at and compare, and how do you stack up? And then complaint trends. Hey, the Federal Reserve had theirs. We mentioned that a little while ago. Here's the FDIC's. We had the CFPB chime in with theirs as well earlier on in our look back here. This would be the CFPB's top complaint trends. Again, what are customers like yours saying to others that maybe you're missing out on, or that you're not in tune to, but should be, because those same types of complaints are likely happening. They just haven't been identified. Number 31. So HUD and OMB got together and they killed off the PAVE task force. The PAVE task force was charged with basically reforming the appraisal industry. The new administration, new leadership at these different government agencies kind of chimed in and said, we're killing off that PAVE task force, which was a multi-agency task force to reform the appraisal industry. Now, it doesn't mean that there are still not things that need to be reformed in the appraisal industry. It's just they're not putting a task force at it, and they're not going to emphasize doing that reform. But okay, a lot of it had to do with bias. Okay, bias is still something you need to be on the lookout for. Illegal discrimination associated with valuations and appraisals. If you see something, you need to make sure you acknowledge it and do something about it. Remember, Regulation B is still going to apply to any valuation or appraisal used in connection with a transaction. Reg B says you cannot illegally discriminate with respect to any aspect of a credit transaction. That would include valuations and appraisals. So regardless of them killing off this task force, it doesn't mean that we still shouldn't look for bias in valuations and then do something about it if we see it. And it's biased towards illegal discrimination. Page 10, number 32 at the top of the page. So crypto asset safekeeping. So there's been a lot put out in the previous years about how and when and if you should do crypto or get into crypto in the financial industry. This basically undoes anything that was said prior. It's a joint statement by the regulatory agencies, the Fed, the OCC, and the FDIC, that says, oh, you know what? You can choose to bank crypto. In fact, just make sure you comply with other laws and regulations that are already out there. We're not going to create new things here. We want to promote innovation and technology and crypto. And so this is the latest on banking crypto assets. Number 33. The CFPB vacated, well, they didn't, a judge vacated the medical debt rule. This rule essentially was going to say, hey, credit reporting agencies, you can't put medical debt on credit reports anymore. The judge said, nope, you've overstepped here, CFPB, you can't do that. Now, what's this mean? Credit reports are still going to have medical debts listed in them. However, while you will be able to use the medical debts because they're still listed in the credit report, okay, you have a right to use that information. Remember, the long-standing rules associated with how you treat medical debt haven't changed. You can't treat medical debt any different than any other debt when you're doing credit evaluation, meaning you can't hold medical debt to a higher bar or have it weighted more heavily than other debts that are also being evaluated in connection with the credit request. That part of the rule, that part of the long-standing rules did not change. The Federal Reserve, just like they put out a publication quarterly, they also put out on an ongoing basis a webinar series. These are free as well. They're good information. Okay, our team always assigns at least one person to go and make sure they listen to whatever these programs are that the Federal Reserve is putting out. They call it Outlook Live. Well, one of them they put out here just earlier this year in July was one on adverse action notices. It was a nice summary of the adverse action notice requirements under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act and the Fair Credit Reporting Act, along with common violations cited by the different regulatory agencies. So even though it's a Federal Reserve publication, they invite other regulators to participate in these. And so I would recommend that you are getting notified of these free publications, and then that you have somebody take them in, because oftentimes, even though it's the Federal Reserve and you might not be regulated by them, okay, somebody from your prudential regulator is likely going to have a part in these publications. They do a good job of that. Number 35, we're getting close to the NMLS registration, the SAFE Act registration timeframe that has to be done annually. Wanted to let you know that the NMLS, where you go and do the registration, that website is going through its modernization phase 2. So things might look a little bit different the next time you go to that website to get things registered. Just want to put that on your radar. Number 36, the agencies have collectively, so this would be the Federal Reserve, the OCC, and the FDIC. I'll make this short and sweet. There were new CRA rules that we were all going to have to comply with, Federal Reserve, FDIC, OCC, okay, interagency, and they have now wiped them out. That's why you see the DeLorean, the time machine there on your screen. We're going to go back to the old rules. We've scrapped the new ones, and we'll stay tuned to see where they decide to take reform next. They've said they're going to do something. They just haven't given us direction. So forget what you knew about whatever the new rules were. We're going back to the old ones for now. Stay tuned for what might be coming next. Page number 30, or I'm sorry, page number 11, number 37. The CFPB has been sued. Gosh, they've been sued a lot of times, right? But this one notably is they're being sued for not implementing the current regulation, hey, that's out there with that is for Section 1071. We were set to cross over mandatory compliance thresholds, and that hasn't happened. So the CFPB has been sued by a collective group of entities, if you will, and individuals for not having implemented the current version. Now, what's their defense? They're rewriting Section 1071, the regulation, at least that's what they tell us, and they hope to have that out very soon. We're looking hopefully by the end of this month. We'll see what happens there. To me, this court case, why I bring it up, it's kind of the wild card. Okay, if somehow this comes to fruition and they win, okay, the people that are suing the CFPB for not implementing the current rule, what does that do to what they're trying to rewrite? And does that mean it's like instantaneously? And so I don't know, it's kind of a wild card. It's a stretch, I think. But this group has a track record. They won, okay, as it related to the HMDA threshold back in 2020. They won, the same group sued the CFPB previously under these Section 1071 requirements to get the regulation out the door, and they won. They actually settled, but the path was going towards them winning. So I don't know, we're gonna have to pay attention to this one and see where it goes. I think if they get the rewrite out, and they do that fairly soon, this becomes a moot issue, but we'll have to wait and see. Number 38, this would be from the White House. It's not an executive order. It's an action plan that says, hey, here's how we're going to win the AI race. It's very important to the leadership in Washington that the U.S. play a major role in winning the race for artificial intelligence on a global level. My takeaway from reading through this, I want to say it's almost 40 pages long, is that number one, don't get in the way of innovation as it relates to AI. And you need to find a way to embrace it. It's not a matter of if, it's when, and it's probably already crossed your financial institution's path as far as it being part of how you do business to a certain extent. Maybe it's very little at this point, but AI is going to be part of everyday life moving forward, and that includes banking and the financial industry. So it's not a matter of if, it's when. And the reason I say don't get in the way, within this action plan, what they carve out is that if you get in the way, if your state gets in the way, then we're going to pull funding. We're going to make things harder for you. Anything we've given to you, and by the way of grants and extras and handouts, you won't be getting those anymore. If you're getting in the way, your state's getting in the way, your industry's getting in the way. And so we need to find a way to embrace is kind of the message there. Again, that's not a law, but framework and policy that's going to be driven by the regulatory agencies. The CFPB number 39 plans to rewrite Section 1033. This is just them announcing that. It's going to come up here again a little bit later on. They put out a preliminary proposal on areas that they should look at, and then they wanted comments to be submitted. Those comments were actually due just the other day, the 21st of October. Let's go to page 12, number 40. Convertible currency kiosk risk. This is just simply an information notice of different things to look for with these kiosks, and if you're associated with them and doing business with them, if they're available to your customers are utilizing them, things to look out for from a suspicious activity standpoint. Number 41, pre-populated information for CIP. So again, trying to reduce burden. You can rely on pre-populated electronic forms for CIP purposes when it comes to collecting that information. Again, just need to comply with the other aspects of the CIP rule along the way, but you're not precluded from utilizing pre-populated CIP information for that purpose. Number 42 is another executive order guaranteeing fair banking for all Americans. This one also had a pretty big splash. This is the debanking executive order that basically says you should not be doing banking based on political beliefs, religious beliefs, or lawful business practice. In other words, shouldn't be turning people away based on those three things. Now, the religious beliefs is already covered from a lending standpoint under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, but political beliefs, there's no law that says you can't take that into consideration. Now, you may be criticized if you are in your next exam, but it's not a legal thing. It's the executive order thing, doesn't carry the same weight. And then lawful business activities doesn't mean you have to bank everyone. You still have a right to bank who you want. There are a lot of banks out there and credit unions out there that choose not to bank certain industries, certain types of businesses, because there's risk associated with it. And I know you're hearing a lot about reputation risk right now. Here's the thing, okay? This is policy and this is framework from a regulatory agency perspective. These things didn't change laws. So you still have a right not to bank who you want to bank. You don't have to bank someone you don't want to do business with, an industry you don't want to do business with. Could you get criticized? Yes, but it won't be legal. Hey, you won't have to go to court over it, okay, provided it's not tied to some other legal protection that's out there. But again, executive order doesn't carry the same weight of law, but it will come up in discussion. You're going to have to be prepared to have the discussion if it comes up that you've chosen not to bank somebody that is part of a lawful business, but just something that you reputationally don't want to get into. Reputation risk should still matter to you. It may not matter to your examiners, may not matter in Washington, but it should still matter to you and the people that run and own your financial institution. Number 43, the CFPB, their rulemaking agenda, kind of a circus how this thing came out. It was put out there, then pulled back down, and then we were left waiting for several weeks. They finally got it out there. It's an ambitious agenda. I did not put the whole agenda in your book. You can get to it through that link, but I'll flash it up on the screen here. 24 different items on the rulemaking agenda for the CFPB. Now, this is their spring 2025 that they put out in the fall of 2025. So they're behind on this already. And then there's headlines out there that the CFPB is looking to close in 3 months. I'm not sure if congressionally they can do that. We'll have to just wait and see, but very aggressive agenda. Some of the things that we're going to talk about when we look up into the horizon for 2026 are going to be pulled out of this rulemaking agenda. We'll talk more about those a little bit when we get there. FDIC signage, I told you this was going to come back around. There's a proposal that's been put out. They're sifting through the comments right now. The idea is to delay this thing until January 1st of 2027 and provide more flexibility with how how we're supposed to go about the required use of the official digital sign and then the non-deposit signage. So we'll wait and see what that final rule is going to look like. We should see that very soon. Section 1033, this is that proposal I mentioned earlier that they said was coming. This is simply them having asked questions of the public and the industry about what they should look at in rewriting Section 1033. Those comments were actually due earlier this week on the 21st of October. The big thing there was the cost to financial institutions for providing the information, trying to do away with that prohibition, and then privacy associated with the data that is covered under Section 1033. So we'll see where that goes here, likely very soon. Looking for a rule by the end of the year, according to the rulemaking agenda. FinCEN advisory regarding Chinese money laundering. They provide red flags and things that we should be on the lookout for from an unusual or suspicious activity standpoint. Make sure you're doing your part to pass this along and increase awareness within your institutions there. Number 47, I think this is one of the best publications I've seen in a long time. So obviously I'm biased. I like the publication itself, the Consumer Compliance Outlook, but this one specifically on fraud. Fraud's gone through the roof. Okay, fraud's been an issue for a long time, but it just seems to have gotten just crazy the last 6 months or more. And this takes and targets specific types of fraud. And I think there's just a lot of good training information, awareness information that you can pass on to your teams as it relates to check fraud and things like that in this issue. They give a lot of different examples in here. So I would make sure you route this to your team within your organization and do your part to increase the awareness associated with the different types of fraud, with paper items, things like that. Page 14, number 48, Home Buyers Privacy Protection Act. So this is a new law, one of the few that we've gotten so far this year, but one that's been a long time coming. Long story short, you've likely received complaints at some point from a customer of yours that's applied for a mortgage loan, and then they get contacted after you pull their credit report from another institution trying to contact them and solicit a similar product, okay? Because there's a thing called trigger leads that consumer reporting agencies provide to other financial institutions. Okay, they can purchase them. So if your customer comes to you and you order a credit report, the other institution that's paying for this service gets notified of that, and then they can reach out to your prospective customer and try to steal them away. Terrible concept, right? But it's something that was going on. Here's the thing: when we get to March 4th, 2026, this practice should be done. Okay, that's the mandatory compliance date for this law taking effect. So you're going to have complaints from customers until then, because the credit reporting agencies can still sell this information until that date. Once we get to March 4th, they can't do that anymore. So can't get here fast enough, right? Page number 49 is a guidance document from FinCEN about sharing information with foreign financial institutions, that we should be doing that. And it doesn't go against the confidentiality associated with suspicious activity reporting. And that they put out things like that a couple different times. This just happens to be the newest one. Number 50, financially motivated extortion, sextortion. That's what this is about. Providing information to assist financial institutions in identifying that in the normal, customer due diligence of what's going on with your customers. When this crops up, gives you different ways to identify that based on trends. Number 51, this is an OCC bulletin about protecting customer financial records. Basically, it's saying, hey, don't file a SAR unless it meets the criteria associated with SAR requirements. Don't turn over information under the Right to Financial Privacy Act if you haven't dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's. Just friendly reminders that information shouldn't be shared unless it meets the criteria associated with laws and regulations. Page number 15, number 52 at the top, the OCC's take on debanking. So if you're an OCC bank, make sure you understand their take on this debanking thing. Remember, it's an executive order, not a law. You can still choose to bank who you want to bank and who you don't want to bank, but it may come up in conversation. You may have to defend yourself because of the policy and the framework by way of that executive order earlier. This is the OCC's take on that. The Genius Act, again, one of the few laws that have been passed this year as it relates to the financial industry. This has to do with stable coins. This was a solicitation on how to go about making laws and making regulations to account for stable coins within the financial industry. And so very early on in the process there, but that's an advance notice of proposed rulemaking as it relates to stable coins. You'll hear more about that in the coming months. And then the last one that's in your book, and I got some bonus information I'm going to share with you here as well, but is the NCUA, their letter on how they're going to stop using reputational risk. Again, your reputation should still matter to you. The regulatory agencies aren't going to use reputation risk in evaluating your financial institution from a safety and soundness standpoint. Okay? But it should still matter to you, okay, what your reputation says about you, how things are affecting your reputation. But it shouldn't come up in an examination. Now, that's where our look back appears to end in your material, but I want to tell you, we had to obviously put these materials together, get them out to you several weeks in advance so we can publish them. And there have been a few things that have come out since that I want to share with you as well. So these are things that are not in your book. So we'll call them bonus items. So the CFPB issued a final rule to delay the 1071 mandatory compliance dates. You can see in that second column from the left-hand side, looking in the new compliance dates, the earliest one is July 1st, 2026. What I want to tell you is this, that date, okay, from the date of the original mandatory compliance date is plus 350 days. So almost a full year. Here's the deal. That date is going to be a moot issue, okay, because they're looking to rewrite Section 1071, the regulation, and we should have that, according to the rulemaking agenda, by the end of this month. And that's going to kick the can down the road even further. And so these dates won't matter. It's going to be something even further out, very likely, once we get that proposal and ultimately a final rule that follows it. So wanted to let you know that they did finalize that, but these dates likely won't matter. It'll be something further on down the road. Our next bonus item is the OCC. I mentioned it earlier. One of the things that they mentioned mid-year was that they aim to reduce burden, and that's going to be something you hear from all of the regulatory agencies. This is a top-down thing from the president, that they want to reduce the burden on the financial industry, and this is the OCC's kind of first stab at that. They put out 4 different things at one time relative to reducing burden. Probably the big one that caught my attention is they're going to kill off the fair housing law requirement for those of you that are OCC regulated, non-HMDA. Now, they haven't killed it yet. There's just a proposal out to kill it, but that's something likely to be coming. Then they joined up with the FDIC on 2 different things. Like the next day or so after that regulatory burden relief issuance, where they put out 4 different bulletins, they put out a proposal that also is joined with the FDIC in clarifying what it means to have a matter requiring attention, and that it needs to meet certain criteria. And while other things can be discussed, they can't be tracked, monitored, maintained the same way an MRA is required to be monitored, tracked, and maintained. And so that's a proposal. I do think there's good there in trying to get everybody to sing from the same sheet of music when it comes to using the terms matter requiring attention and what it is and what it means and what has to be done with it. So I don't think that consistency is a bad consistency to get. The OCC and FDIC also chimed in on reputation risk. I told you a little bit earlier, the NCUA, they put out a notice. This is the FDIC and OCC's version of, we're not going to use reputation risk, but again, reputation risk should still matter to you. They're just not going to use it in criticizing or assessing your institution from a compliance, from a safety and soundness standpoint. And then my last bonus item is the SAR FAQs that were just issued. FinCEN put out 4 different new FAQs on SAR information. Really, it's nothing new under the sun. It's things that have long been discussed and talked about, but just new FAQs to be aware of. There were 4 of them to clarify requirements that they put out just here in the last couple of weeks. So that is our look back at 2025. It's been a busy year. Not a lot of brand new requirements that required a ton of implementation. A lot of wait and see. As far as things on your to-do list, hopefully things you can get crossed off, especially if you miss something. It probably isn't a heavy lift with something that you may have missed along the way here. So that's our look back. Let's take a look at what's just up around the corner here. So as we finish out, believe it or not, 2025 is it's only got a little bit of time left, and it won't be long when we'll be peeling that calendar over and looking at 2026. And so what we put together is, It's a top 10 list, but it's actually got 11 items on it. Now, you'll see why here in just a moment. But kind of our top 10 plus CMS as we go through these here. So here's things to be aware of as we look ahead to 2026 and close out the 2025 year. First off, artificial intelligence, the impact has had a really big impact so far, I think, as far as just in discussions about how it's being utilized just to get things started with the financial industry. It's only going to get bigger. This is just the very beginning stages. And so, as I said earlier, as you've heard from the regulatory agencies, we probably need to find a way to embrace this. It's not a matter of if, it's when, and you're likely already utilizing it in some way, shape, or form to do what you do in the financial industry. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So I think we need to make sure that you've worked that into your management protocol and how you're going to do banking in 2025, moving over to 2026 and beyond. Digital currency, another thing that's here to stay. The regulatory agencies, there was that joint statement that we talked about earlier on in the program where, hey, they're inviting it, bring it on, bank it. Just follow longstanding laws and regulations. Don't get in the way of it. It's part of the innovation and technology push from the regulatory agencies and from the administration. Number 3, this one comes from the CFPB's rulemaking agenda. On their rulemaking agenda, they're going to look to clarify the Dodd-Frank Act version of UDAP. They can't do anything with the Federal Trade Commission. That's a whole different thing. That's unfair and deceptive, Section 5, Federal Trade Commission. But there's a similar set of rules under the Dodd-Frank Act that has unfair and deceptive, but also that's where the term abusive comes from. The history here is that whoever is in charge puts their stamp on this thing. And so there's been 3 or 4 different versions of what it means to be unfair, deceptive, or abusive under Section 1031 of the Dodd-Frank Act. So we'll wait and hear what this administration thinks that unfair, deceptive, abusive means. Likely it will be a light version and one that will not be pushed or emphasized. And that likely all changes when we have a change in leadership, which could come in 3 years if we're just talking about parties, because there's going to be a new president in 3 years, right? That's what we're looking at here. So we'll have to wait and see. Number 4, also from the rulemaking agenda, looking to redo the Truth in Lending Act loan originator compensation rules. Been a lot of talk about this over the years. The problem is it's complicated because it affects other things. You can't just undo the LO compensation rules because they affect other parts of the Truth in Lending Act, like the qualified mortgage rules uses LO comp rules to do their tests and their criteria. And so it's easier said than done, but something they're looking to amend, modify in the future. Number 5 is the mortgage servicing rules. They're required periodically to reassess, to see if they're working as intended, and then look at whether or not they need to be modified, amended, or rescinded along the way. And so that's up for debate again here, and we'll see where things go. Number 6, Section 1033, they're looking to rewrite that. There are court cases that CFPB was sued. They've chimed in and said, all right, we'll rewrite this thing. And those comments with the advance notice of proposed rulemaking, the first version of it were due on the 21st of October. They'll now sift through those, and then they will issue a proposed rule, a rewrite of that rule. I look for any changes to be minor and on the fringes, if you will. The core aspects of that rule I don't think are going to change a whole lot, but some of the stuff on the fringes likely will. Maybe some of the exclusions, well, we'll have to wait and see there. We're a ways out. They do say something by the end of the year. That may just mean the proposal, though, by the end of the year. We may not have the final rule out quite that quickly. That'll be a major as far as things changing that we'll have to work with as far as implementation down the road. Similar to that, Section 1071, the regulatory agenda from the CFPB says rewrite by the end of the month. In fact, I think they need to get it out sooner than later, because if they're really looking to close the doors, and there's not many people there working behind the doors these days, where does this thing end up if they don't get it done very soon? There are several different court cases that are tied up with this thing, and so it has to happen. Otherwise, those courts are going to cause some problems for the CFPB. So I look for them to hold true to their word. We'll see something by the end of the month. Now, I could be wrong, and they could be late on that, but I think it'll be sooner than later. And if they said the end of the month, I think we'll look to see that. If not, it'll be delayed a little bit longer, but something has to happen there. November 2nd, they're due to provide a status update in one of those court cases which is why I think we'll see it by the end of this month. I think they'd like to go and say, hey, we've issued it, so we've held up our end of the bargain. Now let's get this court case taken care of. Number 8 and 9 are kind of interesting. So 8, procedures for guidance documents. So the CFPB wants to write a regulation. Okay, they don't need a law to write a regulation. They can just create a regulation out of thin air. So they could do this. They want to write a regulation to ensure guidance in the future is issued fairly and responsibly. So regulation for issuing guidance. I don't know what to think about that. Stay tuned. Like you see on the screen, we'll see where that one goes. Number 9, kind of along those same lines, they want to create a regulation to ensure regulations keep up with technology and innovation and evolution. I love that theory because we have far too many regulations that are behind on the times. Take Regulation E, take Regulation CC, and there's lots of others. We could go on and on here. We don't have the time to do that here today, but if there was a way to effectively and efficiently ensure that regulations keep up with the times, oh, that would be wonderful. I don't know how they're going to pull that one off, but I like the idea that they're thinking about it, and I don't think it's so much a bad idea, just one that seems really complicated and difficult in doing. So we'll see where that one goes too. Number 10, I think we can tie back to that executive order that we talked about earlier. They really want to make a move when it comes to the fair lending laws, longstanding fair lending laws and regulations. So disparate impact, they would like to completely kill that off. And the executive order that we talked about earlier, the one that had to do with equality and meritocracy, okay, that's just an executive order. It doesn't carry the weight of a law. It doesn't change the law. They can ignore, from a policy-making standpoint, from a framework standpoint, going in and doing regulatory exam standpoint, they can ignore disparate impact and all the theories that go along with it from an examination perspective, from an oversight perspective. But what can't be ignored is the fact that there are long-standing laws on the books that deal with disparate impact, and there's years and years of case law and things out there that are associated with this. And so the civil liability risk that comes with disparate impact and fair lending matters that are related to it doesn't go away because of an executive order. How does it go away? It goes away if they can change the law. Now, lawmaking, we talked about that earlier. They've got majority in the House. They can pass a bill there. They've got majority in the Senate. They can't pass a bill there without having some bipartisan support because they need 60 votes. They have a majority, but they don't have a super majority. Okay, you need the super majority to avoid the filibustering that can happen by the other side that essentially is a waste of time and makes things go nowhere. It's why laws don't get passed. And so the executive orders are likely the way that they're going to pressure and try to push the agenda here, because I don't think they're just going to be able to change things with the way that Congress is made up right now with respect to the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. So that one probably is at a stalemate right now, but it's on their agenda. We'll see what happens. The last item, so that's kind of my top 10 as we look at to turn over the calendar to 2026. And I couldn't leave out number 11, which is compliance management systems. Now, it says emphasis on change management. That's part of it too. But the question we're always asking as a team of our clients is your house of compliance in order? Okay. Yeah, I know we're often worried about the violations for TRID, the violations for this particular regulation, that whatever, doing transaction testing and finding out where we're making mistakes. Yes, it's important to know where you're making mistakes. They could be tips of the iceberg, no question. But the bigger thing is making sure that your house of compliance, your compliance program is in order. Because if you have if your structural elements of your compliance program are all in place and structurally sound, okay, we all make mistakes. We're all human. Hey, those are going to happen. We'll hope that they're not pattern in practice. We'll hope they're not systemic. But when we make the one-off mistake here, the one-off mistake there, or even if we do have something systemic, hey, if our house of compliance is in order, if it's structurally sound, these things are all present and accounted for and working, then it should be a minor issue, even if it is systemic or a bigger thing. We should be able to get over it and get through it efficiently and effective because our house is in order. Make sure you're working on these things. And it starts with that foundation you see at the bottom, culture. Making sure that everybody understands it's their job to do compliance, not just the compliance officer's job to do compliance. They are a conduit information. They are to be seen as a resource. They are not the doers of compliance. Okay? They disseminate information. They give you information so you can do your job and do it efficiently, effectively, and compliantly. We need to make sure everybody's buying into that. If they buy into that, then the whole house is in much better shape because it's got a nice, strong foundation where everybody's buying in and understanding it's their job to get the job done when it comes to compliance. Hey, make sure your house of compliance is in order. Believe it or not, folks, we're creeping up here to the top of the hour, the end of our 1 hour program here today. That was compliance in 2025 and beyond. As we close out the program here today, I want to do this. We do this thing called a forum 4 times a year. Okay, this last one each year is a little bit different. We give you this look back, look forward, make sure you didn't miss something, make sure you've got things ready to go as we move forward. The other 3 that we do throughout the year, we do 1 a quarter, our Q&A. We do a lending Q&A. That's coming up in January 2026. You can already register for that. We do a deposit Q&A and we do an AML CFT Q&A. You can get registered for all of them, okay, and bring your entire team and be part of that Q&A. We have over 1,000 people that show up at every one of these that register for these. I want to say we hit 800-900 today, but we have over 1,000 people that register because these are available on demand. We record them. I know we covered a lot of ground today and you're like, gosh, I missed this, I missed that. You can go back and listen to it again. Give us a little time to turn that recording around. In fact, as part of my closeout here, okay, give us 2 weeks. We'll get that recording back to you. We've also got a short survey. It'll take you less than 60 seconds to give us a little feedback about how we're doing with helping you as you chase after and try to comply with all those requirements out there. With that, I want to thank all of you for stopping by and spending an hour with us, making sure that we didn't miss out on anything as we look back at 2025 and that we're gearing up and getting ready and know what to look for as we finish out 2025 strong and turn that calendar over to 2026. Okay? I'm going to let you get back to what you do best, and that's serving your customers. We'll see you again soon.